Okay, great. Thank you for the introduction. I'm Gina DiDesidero. I write young adult fantasy and science fiction. My debut novel is titled Undrowned. It is in the vein of Percy Jackson, but with Native American mythology, so that is being released by the Chickasaw Press. I also manage a critique group in Brevard County. And prior to coming to Brevard, I managed a critique group for the Knoxville Writers Guild. And before that, I was on various critique forums online with my own writing partnerships. So today, I'm sharing helpful strategies for building a better critique group. Advance. Wrong button, maybe this one. Yes?
Hang on. Let's turn it on.
Oh, let's turn it on.
There we go.
Thank you.
There we go. It helps when you turn it on.
Technical difficulties. Thank you so much. Okay. I am a critique group advocate because I believe critique groups are the best way to grow as a writer. When you work with a critique group, you learn to analyze writing by dissecting it. You take it apart at the seams and you look at the individual story molecules, and you learn so much from the mistakes and the strengths and the weaknesses of the people you're working with. And working with the critique group will forever change the way that you read, because you will begin reading like a writer. The time and the energy that you invest in other people's writing will translate over to gains in your own. You'll write stronger drafts and better revisions as a result. So there are a lot of different ways that you can get feedback on your writing. You can hire developmental editors and line editors and beta readers, but you can also work with critique groups, and you can often get the same kind of feedback in your critique group that you would get from a developmental editor for free. Although I shouldn't say for free, you do need to invest time and energy. You can join critique groups online. There are forums for that. You can join local critique groups, assuming you can find a critique group that writes in your genre and is open to new members. But today I suggest you at least consider starting a critique group from scratch. It's really not that hard, and I have some tips that you can use to get started. Beginning with your very first meeting. I have some discussion points that you can take to your first meeting to make sure you set the groundwork for your critique group. I will also share my tips for giving and receiving feedback so that you can start on a positive note. We'll do a practice critique together, which is why you're seated according to genre, or maybe seated according to genre. I'll also share my tips for managing meetings, particularly when you have a large critique group. And finally, for full disclosure, I will share about the critique effect, what it is, and how you can overcome it. But we'll start with the quick definition. What's a critique group? It's a group of 3 to 8-ish writers who meet regularly to share their writing and give each other feedback. But really, there are a lot of different types of critique groups. 3 to 8 is just what I think is average. It really depends on how you manage your groups. And there are some things you can expect as normal at any critique group that you attend. Most critique groups share a common goal, and they share a common genre, or they're at least genre adjacent. You're seated according to genre, and I heard some people coming in saying, well, I don't know where to sit because I don't write that. But genre adjacent means if you're writing sci-fi, you probably play a little bit better with the fantasy than you do the nonfiction, right? There's usually at least one writer with a little bit more experience. If you're starting a group, it's probably you. Trial periods are often common. You can try the group out, and if it doesn't work for you, then try a different group. 2 to 3 hours is an average meeting time for when you get together, but overall, your commitment to a critique group, I'm estimating, just based on my experience with various critique groups, is about 5 to 8 hours a month. But I am interested in hearing from some other people, because I know there are some people here that are in critique groups. Can I see a show of hands? If you're in or have been in a critique group, curious to know, about how much time would you say that you commit to your critique group every month in terms of preparing feedback, reading, preparing feedback, and attending meetings?
12 hours.
12?
3 to 5.
3 to 5?
8 or more.
What's that?
8.
8? Okay, yeah, and it depends. It depends on your group size, right? That's the answer to a lot of the questions is it depends. Every group is different. How analytical your group is going to be different from another group. If you're starting a group, then you are designating yourself as the group moderator. That means, at first, you're at least the point of contact. You're also responsible for communicating reminders to your group. When are submissions due? Have you turned in the feedback? Our next meeting is whenever it is. You're also responsible for managing logistics, at least at the start. This means when you get started and if you designate a place that will be your common meeting place, you'll probably want to do a dry run there. If it's a cafe, for example, and you're going to meet at 10 a.m. on Tuesday, go there, 10 a.m. on Tuesday. Make sure that you can hear everybody over the ice machines, right? You're responsible for keeping the group on track during meetings, and I'm going to argue that's probably the thing that you need to do the most, because you get together and you're just going to want to talk and talk and talk. Yeah, and you want to make sure you get to all submissions. So cutting the rabbit trails off, you're going to need to be doing that a lot, every meeting. This can also rotate, this role can rotate to other group members. Some groups I've attended, they have a designated timer, and that role also rotates. Just thoughts. You take today's tips and tailor it to your groups and their needs. To start though, you're going to need to find your people. And you're in a good place here to find some writers, possibly for your group, especially since you're maybe seated according to genre, the people next to you might be great candidates. You do want to make sure they're writing in your medium, which means if you're writing screenplays, you're looking for someone who's writing screenplays. If it's novels, you're looking for novelists, right? And in your genre or genre adjacent. The Guild is a great place, but you can also look at conferences, writing workshops, look for book clubs, any place where you can find writers. I mean, it's not like we're just in one climate zone, right? Keep in mind, the larger your group, the larger the commitment for each of the group members. Oh, did I miss one? Oh, okay, and you want to attract at least one writer that is a little bit more experienced to your group, and that's probably going to be you. Now, I like to use a questionnaire when I'm building my groups. And I like questionnaires because I feel that they communicate the expectations to someone who may have never been in a critique group before. So my favorite questions here are, what are your writing goals? What do you hope to get out of critique group? And what do you hope to offer critique group? Because each member in your critique group has something unique to give. There might be someone in your critique group who is just a really linear thinker, and that is a benefit to your whole group. Someone else is very holistic. Every person has something to give, and every person, you're gonna learn from each other's strengths as well as your weaknesses. I also like to ask for writing samples, and I will take my questionnaire and my writing sample to my critique group if we're already established, and this gives them a chance to look at the writing sample and look at the writer from an objective standpoint to decide if they want to add a new member to their group. We're not always open to new members, but when we are, this should be a group decision because it's an added layer of commitment. I do highly recommend you hold an initial meeting with any recruits that you have that are interested in joining your group, and you want to lay the foundation for your group with some discussion. Specifically, you'll want to discuss logistics, submission and feedback guidelines, as well as your meeting format. And by logistics, I mean, are you always going to meet in person? Or if someone's sick or away, would you consider meeting virtually? You'll need to discuss that. Are you going to only meet monthly? That's the common interval for critique group meetings, but you do what you want, right? Where and when will you meet? There are a lot of options here. There's cafes, libraries, restaurants. Maybe you have access to a community center. You'll want somewhere quiet though, for sure, so that you can hear all group members. You'll want tables, you'll want chairs. Everyone's bringing their laptop. So you're gonna want Wi-Fi. You're going to want power. And because your meetings are going to be 2, 3, however long they are gonna be, you're gonna want bathrooms. And you're probably gonna want something to eat and something to drink. I've been in groups where it's been a writing club with wine, and then it's turned into a wine club with writing. So I just want to say, try not to make it about the food or the drink, because you're going to get a little carried away if you do. Submission guidelines. You'll want to discuss how you're going to share your writing, and there are a lot of different ways to do this. You can read it aloud during your meeting. You can distribute hard copies. Email attachments are very common and very easy. There's a downside to any of these, and I'll talk about them. I also like sharing Word docs or Google Docs. Super easy to collaborate on them, but you do what works. I've been in a group where we use Discord, which is actually a gaming platform for communication, but you can, if you have a chat channel and you can upload your writing, it's very convenient. Of this group, I'll tell you, honestly, my favorite is to collaborate with Word docs or Google Docs, because it's very easy to share. There's a little button in the upper right-hand corner. You click share, you write in the email addresses of all the group members, and you give them what's called restricted access to your document. It's not going all over the world, it's just going to those people. And then from there, you can grant them permission. You either give them editing permission or reading only permission if you're using Word docs, and from there you can set your tracked changes so that it will track changes for all of the group members that comment. For Google Docs, it's even easier. You can give the same editing access or read-only access. However, there's a third option called either suggesting or commenting.
It's commenting.
Is it called commenting? Okay. Commenting access, if you give them commenting access through Google Docs, all the changes are automatically tracked. Anything that they write, it will be highlighted in green. Very nice. You can also, for either of these options, they can leave comments. They can highlight portions of the text, hit the comment button, and any comments will appear as inline suggestions on the side in those margins. They can even respond to comments from other people in your group, which is really great, because it's almost like, in some ways, having a critique group meeting before a critique group meeting. They can say, I agree with that, no, I disagree. How much will you share? That's something else you'll need to decide. Many critique group, they land on a certain word count, 2,000 words or 5,000 words a month. You want to keep in mind, whatever you decide is going to be multiplied back to you in terms of feedback. What I mean is, if you have a group of 6 and you decide to share 5,000 words every month, you're sharing 5,000, but you're responding to 25,000, which might be a bit much if you're wanting to keep up with your writing. Whole manuscripts, I highly suggest you at least consider a mechanism for sharing whole manuscripts in your critique group, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. Your feedback guidelines are going to mirror your sharing guidelines. So if you're reading aloud during a group, then you're listening to feedback aloud, right? If you're sharing via email with attachments, then you're getting attachments back with feedback. I do want to say the drawbacks to using email. If you decide to use email attachments as your way of sharing and giving feedback, do yourself a favor and choose a format ahead of time, because otherwise I guarantee someone's going to send you a Word doc, someone else it's PDF, someone else it's rich text format, and someone else is going to be pasting it right into the body of the email. And it's going to be confusing. There's going to be all of these email chains. People are going to delete the email chains, and then they're going to delete your attachment and say, I didn't give you feedback because I don't have your attachment. That's why I like to use Word and Google Docs. When will you share? I think there's a benefit to sharing feedback before your actual meeting because it gives people a chance to kind of steep in any possible negative feedback that they receive. They'll be a lot less visceral when you get together and more receptive to negative feedback. And I think the sweet spot is about 7 days before, or between 7 and 2 days before your meeting for receiving feedback early. You can do it during the meeting, obviously. Okay, I know I'm going kind of fast here, so questions? Any questions? Any comments? Yes?
So if you're sharing feedback before the meeting, then what are you doing in the meeting?
You're discussing the feedback, because sharing your feedback when you're giving written feedback versus telling you in person, it is different. It is very different. You tend to go into detail and you can clarify feedback when you meet together in your group. Any other questions? Okay. In terms of giving feedback, if you spend time ensuring that you deliver insightful feedback every time you give feedback, you're more likely to receive great, meaningful feedback in return. So keep the objective in mind when you're giving feedback on somebody else's writing, and the objective is to help the writer improve their piece to fit their vision, not yours. You're not trying to mold somebody else's writing so it sounds like yours, your style, your preferences. It's about their target audience and their ideal reader. There is an easy way to say hard things, and I think using a feedback sandwich definitely sweetens it a bit. You start with good. You have a meaty middle of the constructive negative feedback, and you end with praise. But that meaty middle, you want to limit how much feedback you're giving in terms of the negative feedback, because you want to make sure that that sandwich is going to be palatable. If you give too much negative feedback, you're going to wear out your critique group. They're going to become discouraged. And I've heard people say, I've had bad experiences at critique groups. Anyone? Bad experiences at critique groups? Yeah, it's fair. Limit negative feedback, but most importantly, what you want to do is you want to choose the negative feedback that is going to result in the greatest overall improvement of the manuscript or of the writing. So you need to figure out what of the things that you want to say is really going to actually help. Yes?
Could you give an example of a bad way to do it and good way?
Yes, actually, we're going to do a critique sample together. Yeah, we're going to do that. But I would say a bad way to give critiques is to look at the grammar, the misspellings. That is not going to be helpful, especially in an early manuscript, because someone who's on a second draft might delete that entire chapter. They might kill off that character. So you need to think a little bigger picture in terms of your feedback. Describing and labeling, I think, is another very helpful thing, because if you give vague feedback to somebody, I just didn't like it. What are you going to do with that? That's not very helpful. Negative feedback is crucial. You need negative feedback because you're going to take that and turn that into a better way to do it, right? So you need to hear what people don't like. But the vague feedback isn't helpful. So when you read something and you don't know what it is, you can't put your finger on it. There's something wrong with it. Sit with that feeling long enough until you can come up with a label for it. What is it that bothers you about the writing? And then describe it. Describe it to the person, give it a label. That skill right there is going to lead you tremendous gains for you, not just the writer, but for you as well, because you will take that skill and you will be much better able at analyzing your own writing. Finally, you want to think like the ideal reader. Yes?
Can I make a classic example?
Sure.
I had an editor edit one of my poems. I wrote a poem about how many cells. You know, we have a shy cell, very smart cell,
Right.
or whatever. Many cells compose our human cell. And he switched it to thyself be true. That was not me.
That is a good
So-
example, yeah.
And there was no way I could change it after it was printed.
Oh,
We were okay right up until that point.
You can do an update.
ouch.
That one, I think we all felt that.
Yes.
That's what you do.
No, that is a good example.
It can be so easily done.
That's what you do.
It's true.
Very careful
It gets stupid.
what we want to change.
And doesn't that point to your question there about try to assume what is written is intended,
Exactly.
as opposed to trying to interpret what they're writing is what you think it means?
Exactly. Yeah, it's all about the ideal reader of the author and their vision. What is their message for it? You need to respect that, respect their style. It might be different than yours. It could be, and that's okay, because you don't want your critique group to all start writing like you, right? No. Okay, some things to keep in mind here.
Gina, I have another
Yeah.
example,
Mhm.
which I was a part of Gina's group early on, but then sadly I had to go out. I wasn't writing as much, and the duties with the guild actually, so, and I miss it terribly, which she knows. But I did have a couple of submissions, and one of them is a genre that I am not familiar with at all. I happened to look to read it, I have no familiarity. It is sci-fi. But I had this idea, and I'm like, and I sent the first chapter.
That's
And
fine.
I had great feedback, but I also had great negative feedback. But two were fit into the example of good, not good,
Yeah.
or not helpful to the ideal reader, or to me, or even to the person who gave it. And it was, one was, for me, I thought while she was flying around in her UFO, in her spaceship, that, when you look at her spaceship, they have those underlightings, that this particular scene, everyone knew that there were underlightings. And nearly everyone in the critique group, and a few people that weren't, that I had sent it to, said, it was dark, but then she could see. And I just thought everyone would know that. And that was wonderful to point out, that you have to get a little more technical with that. But one that wasn't helpful at all was one that came back and said, well, my brother-in-law's cousin works in aeronautics, and he said that there's no way that the science and the physics can allow for our ships to land on off planets. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, when I watch Star Wars, it's kind of implied that they figured that part out.
Yeah.
I'm not pissed off that they did that. I don't know that they can tell me to figure it out. So that
Yeah.
was way broader, not really helpful, but also in developing the thick skin, which I'm sure you're going to go into.
Yeah.
Me, myself, I wasn't going to come back at that. She meant well. I understood what she was saying. I then have to take that. I'm going to just
That's it.
put that to the side.
Yep.
And I'm going to focus on the ones that did point out where I left anomalies. That any person who does read sci-fi would pick up like that.
That's it.
So I thought that was
Yeah.
like one that was good and one that didn't really help me.
And that's exactly it, because you're going to get good feedback and you're going to get less good feedback. And ultimately, it's up to you as the author to decide the changes that you want to make to your manuscript. You don't have to take it all. You eat the meat and you spit out the bones, right? So, things to keep in mind. You're working with works in progress. So, like I said earlier, if you're working with a writer who is in a second draft, then you don't want to make suggestions, grammatical suggestions, things that aren't going to make a big difference. The writer isn't the character, and neither are you. That can lead to some pretty weird, awkward circumstances. Okay, they're not writing about you. They're not writing about you. No one person in your critique group is always right either, because this is such a subjective subject, writing, and everyone has a different opinion on how it should look. What are the steps? I mean, it's different from one person to the next. Always assume what's written is intentional as well. Give the writer the benefit of the doubt. And finally, don't show off. When you are giving your feedback, it can be tempting to kind of wittily make fun of the writer and their problems and make yourself look great in the eyes of the other writers at the expense of the author. Just don't do it. Now, when you are reading submissions from people in your group, you might come across issues that are a little more pervasive. These are the things that you want to point out especially. They should be prioritized higher on your feedback list, so to speak. And you want to start by using just the facts when you address them. The facts being, point to the examples from the text so they know where you're coming from. And then label and explain the effect that that pervasive issue has on the reader. Then you suggest ways to improve it, ideally using the writer's own style, maybe even their own words in context. And finally, you can drop a link or something to other resources where they can learn more. A link or a book, point them somewhere for another authority on it. Now, at this point, we're going to use our critique samples. I have some handouts here, and I'm going to just here pass these around. Take one, pass them around. Go. One more. I think there should be enough for everyone.
In the meantime,
Take
has this
one,
session
pass them
seen,
around.
The sign, no? Okay, I'll start here.
Okay. This is our critique sample. I actually had this written by ChatGPT. Yeah. ChatGPT wrote this for me, and then I cannibalized it. Each passage has an issue of some kind, and overall there are problems with it. But this is subjective. Some of the things on here are less subjective. You should be able to see right away, in some instances, what the problem is. This is titled Silk Road. It is a historical fiction. The point of view is omniscient, past tense. Okay, so just for fun, and this is the part that I might need a little help with. I was going to have, okay, I'm doing Alt-Tab. How do I transition to Word here?
Alt-Tab.
Alt-Tab, that's what I thought. Alt-Tab. Cool, okay, that worked. Okay, I am going to have my Microsoft, I like to use text-to-speech when I'm editing, especially my own work, because I get so close to it that I can't always hear the problems. But text-to-speech I have found really helpful for the problems just jump right out at me. So I am going to, I'm going to have the AI here, text-to-speech is called Read Aloud. Read the first passage for us so that you can hear this voice. The female voice is my preferred voice here.
1. In the golden light of the setting sun, the bustling market of Samarkand was shimmering, its labyrinthine streets alive with the vibrant colors and exotic scents of the East. Converging upon this ancient city were caravans from distant lands. Their camels were laden with precious cargo destined for markets as far-flung as Constantinople and Xi'an. And amidst this bustling tapestry of merchants and traders, one man was standing apart. His gaze was fixed upon the horizon with a sense of purpose that was bordering on obsession.
Okay, and I'm pausing there. That's just passage 1. What do you think of the voice, by the way? It's gotten a little better, right? Better than it was.
Pauses sometimes a little, but the tones are nice. And
It's not bad.
exotic words here, which it is able to.
It didn't do too terribly bad. So for passage 1, I would like my first row, your poetry here, your possibly poetry. Let's do poetry. I'm going to hear from poetry first. What do you think the problem is in passage 1? This one's probably the most difficult, by the way. Way too many words. This one's probably, honestly, the most challenging. I'm gonna give you a hint here. His gaze was fixed upon the horizon. It's passive. Every sentence in passage 1 is passive. So, the favorite tense. Favorite tense. Okay. Yes, every sentence in passage 1 is passive. So, to address this as a pervasive issue, you would highlight passage 1, and if it's the favorite tense, you'll have lots of opportunities to point it out if it's a pervasive issue. Then you'll start with the facts. What does passive tense do to the reader? What does it do?
It takes you outside.
It what?
It takes you outside of
It distances. It takes you outside, okay? It does. It distances the reader. So passive tense, in terms of sentence structure, what it does is it takes the focus off the object and it puts it on the subject of the sentence. And in doing so, it weakens the verb. And that all sounds really highly technical, but in the end, it's the effect that matters. The effect is such that it weakens your connection with the reader. So 90% of the sentences that you write in fiction should be active, strong voice. Active, strong verbs. Okay.
So for me,
Yeah.
because I had that problem.
Yeah.
With technical writing. it's always-
Right, exactly.
So what I did was I got a tool that did many things, but one of the things it does is identify active, passive voice. And
Yep.
I just had to go through that intensely.
Yeah.
Removing and
Yep.
butchering every word, every passage.
Yeah.
And just getting it down to, it gives you a nice word count.
Yep.
not bad, and getting into acceptable.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Initially passive, you always gotta go back and figure out how to do it.
You start hunting it out. It's true, yes,
I was an English teacher,
yes.
and I have lost some of my marbles.
Yeah.
But, that to me is just past progressive. You're using
The ing.
were as a helper verb.
Yeah,
Passive would be if you use
Yes.
she was
yes.
Gotta get plugged in.
struck by lightning.
Yes,
Now, that's
exactly.
because you're using the other form of struck. There are times when you want to use past progressive, like she was shelling the beans. when
Yes.
the phone rang.
Right,
You wouldn't want to say she shelled beans when the phone rang. It was an ongoing
yes,
action.
exactly. No, there's a time for passive. There's definitely a time for passive because sometimes that's what you want to do is put the focus on the subject rather than the object.
Passive there would be the beans were being shelled. The passive, the beans were shelled. If she's shelling beans, that's active.
Yes.
She was shelling beans.
Yes, okay. All right. Any other comments for passage 1?
Autocritic.
Oh, I couldn't read them. Is that good?
It is. It's for me. I've got one
Okay.
of the deals where I did a lifetime for like $150. The Albert Act once a rare now and raised money. They'll sell a lifetime membership instead of the monthly. For like $150.
Yeah, there are a lot of,
Autocritic.
yeah, I like Pro Writing Aid. There's a lot of places where you can go. They'll help you find things like that. It's true. I'm going to go to passage 2. Different issue.
Passage 2. My name is Malik Al-Farouk. A seasoned merchant, I built my fortunes upon the trade routes of the Silk Road. With my weathered face and piercing eyes, I cut a striking figure against the backdrop of the market, my presence commanding respect among my peers and rivals alike.
Okay. Passage 2. Let's do second row. Wait, what genre are we here? Children's? Oh, children's and memoir? Okay, let's do children's and memoir. What's the problem with passage 2?
He's talking about stuff like he's a character.
It's weird.
Narrative voice.
You shouldn't be able to see himself that way.
That's another problem. Yeah, those are all valid. He shouldn't be able to see himself. He's describing himself. The major issue here is this is supposed to be written in omniscient, and it has suddenly switched to first person. Yes, it has switched point of view to first person. Okay. That one was easier. Passage 3. I'm going to continue.
Passage 3. As the last rays of sunlight fade into dusk, Malik retreats to the sanctuary of his opulent caravan, where he pores over maps and ledgers by the soft glow of oil lamps. For weeks, rumors spread of a new route that promises to revolutionize the silk trade, a route that bypasses the treacherous deserts of the south and opens up untold riches to those bold enough to seize it.
Okay, let's do the next genre here. What is the problem with passage 3?
Mixed tenses?
It mixed tenses. It specifically went into what tense? Present. But according to our ChatGPT, it's supposed to be written in past, right? All right, passage 4.
Passage 4. With an unyielding determination kindling within the depths of his soul, Malik beckoned forth his esteemed conclave of counselors, a heterogeneous assemblage of merchants and polymaths whose erudition traversed the expansive breadth of the known cosmos. Like celestial luminaries, they convened at his summons, their intellects ablaze with the fervent pursuit of enlightenment and conquest. United in purpose, they delved into the labyrinthine intricacies of the proposed route, each facet meticulously scrutinized with the nuanced precision of virtuosic craftsmen, as they endeavored to unravel the enigmatic tapestry of fate and fortune interwoven into the fabric of their odyssey.
This one should be pretty obvious. What's the problem? Adjective salad. Yeah, this is, I like to call this purple prose. Have you ever heard of purple prose? This is purple prose. It is flowery to the point where you can't even, what is it saying? And even worse, it sticks out because nothing else here is written like that, right?
Summarize, he consulted experts, they advised.
Yes, exactly. Say it simply. Okay, passage 5.
Passage 5. It is a perilous journey, an adventure fraught with danger and risk, one advisor cautioned and warned, his brow furrowed with concern and his expression etched with worry. Bandits and brigands roam the mountains and haunt the passes. The terrain and landscape is as unforgiving and merciless as the gods themselves. But Malik would not be deterred. He remained resolute. With a confidence born of years spent navigating the treacherous waters of commerce, and a surety honed by traversing the hazards of trade, he outlined his plan. He laid out his strategy with the precision of a military tactician or a seasoned general. He meticulously considered each detail and carefully calculated every element to ensure success and guarantee triumph.
Okay, what is the problem with passage 5? The dialogue is not great. It is telling, and it is very repetitive. So, if you read through this, every thought is repeated twice. In fact, the way that I made this is the first paragraph, I rewrote it in different words, and then I folded those two paragraphs together. This is an example of overwriting. It's a perilous journey. It's an adventure fraught with danger. Those are the same thing, basically. It's just nuances, right? One advisor cautioned and warned.
It's not a bad.
Right? But Malik would not be deterred. What was that? He remained resolute. Every idea in here is repeated. So how do you address this? Overwriting. What's that?
Cross off one.
You start fiddling around with that delete button.
Self-edit.
You've got to suggest that they start
Red line. You got a red
deleting. Delete. Fold things together, combine, pick your favorite one and delete the rest, right?
I like green. Now, in Word, and I see the other green ones, you can do put on
The
the
green.
extract edits, and you can
Will?
just delete it, it'll still keep the margins there, and then you can look at it, and look for words you saw removed, and see how it goes.
That one?
And you can here remove them, you know, do simple edits, and so it'll show, so you can play with it. Moving
Yeah.
Which one you want to get rid of, and go back and forth and say, which is one I want to keep, which one I don't want to keep.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and less is often more. I mean, once you've
That's
nailed,
it.
once you've
Yeah.
nailed what you wanted to say,
Yeah.
don't continue saying it.
I'm definitely a reformed overwriter. I used to want to say the same thing 5 different ways. Like, that doesn't help anybody. It needs to be concise. You need to suggest that they play with word economy.
Does it help if you spread it out over chapters?
If you like your data drops, if you have background, yeah, sprinkle it a little bit here or there. But if it's the same idea, what does it do? When you overwrite, it slows the pace. And sometimes you want to do that. Sometimes you want the pace to slow down, but usually as your default, you just, this idea and then that, and then this, and then that. Keep moving.
that's one of the things that my little tool does too, is pacing.
Yeah,
I'm not
pacing.
sure the algorithm that uses to figure that out, but it'll apply paragraphs, slow pacing.
Yeah, slow pacing.
What's going on here?
That means less words. Less words makes things go faster, usually, right? Okay, passage 6.
Passage 6. We will travel under the cover of night, using the stars as our guide, Malik declared, his voice unwavering. And we will rely on the strength of our bonds and the wisdom of our ancestors to see us through. And so, with the dawn of a new day, Malik al-Farouk set forth on a journey that would test the limits of his courage and the depths of his ambition. With his caravan of merchants and adventurers in tow, he ventured into the unknown, guided by a single, unshakable conviction that the pursuit of fortune was a journey without end, a quest that would lead him to the very ends of the earth and beyond. Perhaps that was why the aliens abducted Malik.
They take away the end of the story.
Okay. So, what's the problem with passage 6?
You're done reading the story.
Well, he's going to travel under the cover of night, but then he starts off in the morning.
Okay.
Contradictory.
A new dawn, dawn of a new day. This is true.
The aliens came out of left field.
Left
Came
field.
out of the stratosphere.
That's exactly it. The alien, I mean, it's so unforeseen, it's funny, right? You could not have seen that coming in a bad way, right? There's no foreshadowing of that at all. So the reader isn't surprised, oh, all this time he's going to be abducted by aliens. There's no way they could have seen that coming.
Talk about mixing genres.
Yes. Okay, let's see. There.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay. Are there any other problems with this you want to discuss? I heard somebody else say there wasn't much character development.
No.
All tell. It's all tell.
Now, are these developed each one by AI, or you took AI and manipulated it?
So I had this write AI, and then I divided it into 6 passages, and from there I toyed with each passage so that there was a specific problem with it.
Oh,
Yeah.
The AI kind of created the basic story.
Yes.
And what was the name of this AI?
ChatGPT.
Cat, okay, cat.
Yeah. Okay, so we discussed the passive voice at the beginning. Yeah. We discussed this pretty much. Sample critique. I'm catching up with my notes here. Okay, so you practice giving feedback. How can you receive feedback? Receiving feedback is not easy, really. You want to start by keeping an open heart and an open mind, especially during meetings when people are telling you your feedback sandwich, your negative feedback. If you have a running rant in the back of your head about how they just don't understand your artistic genius, then you're not going to be listening to what they're saying. You'll be closed off, not receptive. You need to intentionally keep an open heart and an open mind. It's totally okay to ask for what you want, though. If you want feedback on pacing or character development, ask for it. But don't take negative feedback personally, because your writing is not your baby. It's really not.
Your ego has to go right.
It has to. You cannot take your ego to a critique group. You can edit your writing, you can't edit your baby. You have to leave all that behind. Do clarify. When you receive negative feedback that you might not agree with, clarify to make sure you're on the same page as the person giving you the critique, but don't get into the habit, I'm telling you, don't get into the habit of defending your writing. Because what will happen is the other critique group members won't feel that they can be honest with you, and they will give you less feedback and less negative feedback. And at that point, why go to a critique group meeting? So don't defend your writing. You don't have to agree with what they say, though. That is totally fine. In fact, I recommend you don't agree with every single thing that you are told. And I'll talk about why later. But it's okay. You don't have to agree. But what you really should do is always express gratitude, because someone took the time and the energy to tell you what they thought about your writing. So no matter what you think about it, you're ultimately the one who's going to decide what to do with that feedback. You're the author. So you eat the meat, you spit out the bones, and always end with, thank you, I'll see what I can do about that.
Can you pause for a minute?
Sure.
In your critique group, who every other person has told them the same concerns, like 2 or 3 concerns, but then every week it's the same.
The same problem.
After years, then what do you do? Seriously, what do you do?
No, that is a challenge. I mean, at that point, you have to ask if they understand and they just don't want to implement any suggestions. They're the author. It's up to them. But you don't have to stay in a critique group where you feel like you're giving feedback that isn't being heard. That's another option. It is. Comment. Live and let. Yeah, exactly. They're the author. They get to choose what they do with their own work. Okay. I want to talk about how to manage meetings, especially when you have a large critique group meeting, because you will talk forever. I like to divide my critique group meetings into the critique circle format and follow that with open discussion. And I'm going to lead you through this. It's a bit like a card game because everybody takes turns. And it's going to be redundant, but I'm going to try and move fast here. Let's say that this is you here, the red writer. All right, you're the moderator of your group, and you've already gone through and you've decided how you're going to meet. You've swapped your writing. Now you're at your first critique group meeting. You want to start with your submission, perhaps, and you say to everyone else, get your notes out. We're going to talk about my writing first. It's a selfish way to start, but you could do that. The writer to the left is going to begin first, and the gray writer will give you a feedback sandwich. For 3 minutes, the gray writer will speak, and no interruptions while the gray writer is speaking. At most, maybe an interjection of, yes, I agreed with that. When the gray writer is finished, the teal writer speaks for 3 minutes, 3 minutes of feedback, 3 minutes of feedback, 3 minutes of feedback. That's 12 minutes of feedback. And now it's your turn to speak. You have 3 minutes to respond. And you don't want to spend your time getting defensive. You want to spend your 3 minutes clarifying to make sure that you understand the feedback that you're given. And now this submission is closed. You've discussed this submission, you move on to the next. Everybody gets out their feedback for the gray writer submission, and you go around the circle again. 3 minutes, 3 minutes, 3 minutes, 3 minutes of feedback, and gray writer responds in 3 minutes. Teal writer submission will be reviewed next. 3 minutes, 3 minutes, 3 minutes, 3 minutes of feedback. Teal writer responds in 3 minutes. Finally blue, or I guess it's purple-blue. 3 minutes, 3 minutes, 3 minutes, 3 minutes of feedback, blue responds, and finally purple. 3 minutes, 3 minutes, 3 minutes of feedback, wait, 3, 3, 3, 3, and 3 minutes of response. That means it takes 15 minutes to discuss one writing sample, right? And you have 5 people in your group. So at 3 minutes a pop, that's an hour and 15 minutes. If you want to make it 4 minutes, you could, and that's going to be an hour and 40 minutes to discuss just discussing feedback. After that, you move into open discussion. And I will be honest, because this is full disclosure, open discussion is possibly the most productive part of your critique group meetings, because you can draw comparisons and you can talk deeply about craft. There's a lot that comes out of open discussions, these aha moments. So I want to ask, why, if open discussion is so fruitful, do you want to have a critique circle format to start with? What's the benefit there?
It's a structure.
The structure does what?
She said organization.
Organization. It keeps everyone organized. What else? Everyone gets a chance to speak. That's very important. Anything else?
An overview.
You get an overview.
Before you go into the
Yeah, that's true. You get an overview.
You can call the overlap, so you can get a more targeted discussion of what you're going to go into.
Targeted discussion for the open discussion periods. Yeah, the seeds come out. It's true. Seeds from the critique circle will feed into open discussion. But one of the most important reasons you want to do this is because of time. Doing a critique circle with a timer especially condenses that portion of your discussion so that you have more room for that open discussion later. Otherwise, if you try to fold these in together, your meeting is going to be so long. And what happens, because I've been to meetings like this fifth person to go, purple, by the time you get to the purple discussion, nobody wants to talk about it. They're done. And this gray person's going to get up and walk out. Now we don't get to hear what gray writer has to say. So you want to do critique circle with a large group of 3 or more, I'm going to suggest. A group of 4 or more, you want to do a critique circle. Otherwise, you won't get to every person. Another added benefit. In some critique groups, there might be a member who is submitting writing, but not submitting feedback, or at least not very much feedback. And every time that it's their turn in a critique circle, you can tell that they're not giving much feedback. So it holds them accountable. It gives all people an opportunity to be heard. No one voice outshines another. Every story is given equal weight. I highly suggest you use the critique circle format.
Question?
Absolutely.
I'm a little confused about what goes on the open circle.
Oh,
I mean, open discussion.
open discussion, you can, so what I often do, I'll tell you, okay. When you're listening to your critique, I prefer to take notes. I take notes when I'm listening to my critique because that's what I'm going to, my time, when it's my turn to talk, I want to respond to the questions that I still have. You will never get through all those questions. You will never get through all those questions. Open discussion is for overflow. It's for the things that come out of the critique circle. It's for, I don't really understand voice. What is that? Now you're going to talk very deeply about voice. As the moderator, take notes when other people are talking and there are questions, and you'll say, I'll get to this later, I'll get to that later. You write it down, open discussion, now you open up that jar and you discuss whatever it is. Is that fair? Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
For a novice who has never been in a critique group, is there a cheat sheet about the ideas that one should be looking for when you critique yourself?
Specific things to look for. I've heard acronyms. There's a lot of different ways to look for problems in writing. The things that we discussed today, I think, are a great starting point. You want to make sure people are writing active, strong voice, that they're consistent with whatever their style is. You want to make sure that they're keeping to the present if they're speaking in the present. If it's in the past, that it stays in the past. Respect the point of view, whoever the character is. Not to, I mean, there's a long list, but the things that we talked about today, I think it's a good place to start. Yeah.
How do you protect against plagiarism?
Plagiarism in a critique group?
In your group.
In your group. I'm going to be honest, I have never personally worried about it because you're working with second drafts, third drafts. Anybody care to comment on that? I've never worried about it.
I'm not worried about, I mean, there is a trust quid pro quo thing there.
Yeah.
I go to a critique group with other writers struggling as myself, that I don't know, it's a weird thing, because you could almost feel like a gut instinct if someone is of that caliber versus not. And I just never come across where that was even like a thought.
I think the major thing to keep in mind with that is you're looking at not almost seeds of ideas in critique groups. They're just seeds, but somebody has to grow that and nurture it and feed it. And that takes a lot of time and effort. So, yeah.
You're talking like 5,000 words or less, wasn't words submittable that you're going to be submitting to this. It's a molecule. It's a small.
It is. It's a thin slice of a manuscript.
Plagiarism, in my mind, it's a bigger concept.
You're taking it all.
It's a more detailed, approach or some unique aesthetics that someone would plagiarize. In some cases, it might be complementary there. But in your critique group, you're going to learn word structures, I'm imagining, and you actually authors may want to borrow back and forth, the active voice and phraseologies and how to do colloquial terms and stuff.
Sure.
They help each other.
Well, that's the idea, is you're helping each other, right?
So,
Yeah.
That's a good question. And plagiarism, what level are you plagiarizing? What level?
Comment.
I've done hundreds of websites for people, and they all want NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, and they're so worried about their idea being stolen. I suggest you take your idea and you try and sell somebody on it. They're not going to take it. They got their own ideas.
I've never worried about it.
Honestly, yeah, on that vein, like in a critique group, we are all coming to the group with our babies.
Yeah.
Don't want to use that word, but you feel that way about it. At least starting out, people tend to do. And it's like, I'm working on my baby, you're working on your baby, and he's working on his baby, and we're here to help with each other's babies, but I don't want your baby, because I'm working really hard on this. There's a weird, there's just something there that it's just not something that I really worry about.
Comment.
You had mentioned something about a word count.
Word count. Sorry.
How many words would you suggest are in a submission to get critiqued?
So it depends. It depends on your group. If you have a smaller group, you can afford to share more and not be inundated with how many words you're responding to for feedback. Currently, my group right now, it's 4,000. But my group is smaller right now. If you have a larger group, you might want to start with 2,000 as a suggestion. But you play with it and see what works, because too many words and you won't feel like you can get to it all, but each group is different.
Like poetry will not be that many words.
Exactly. Poetry, if you're writing macro or flash fiction, it's going to be very different. Okay, we're doing good with time, but I'm going to keep moving here. Story levels. There are 3 story levels. There's the big picture level, the scene level, and the line level. Now, the big picture level, these are just ideas here for what it is. It's looking at your story from 100 or 1,000 feet up. It is the overall view of your story, when it starts, when it ends, who the major characters are in the story, the pinch points, the reversals, the plot, the development, and the scene level is the chapter. It's those mini arcs that add up to make your acts, right? Your line level is, as the name implies, the sentences and the paragraphs. So these all feed into each other. The sentences feed the paragraph, which feeds the mini arcs, which feeds the acts, which feeds your whole story, right? It's all connected. Now, this is my point here. When you're working with a critique group, you get pretty good at analyzing and writing at the scene level and the line level. But it is a lot harder to see the big picture in your story, because your critique group is essentially looking at your story through a microscope. I mean, can you see an elephant through a microscope?
Yes.
You can, but you have to be intentional with it. Now, this can lead to some problems in your manuscript if you're not careful. This is the critique effect, okay? The critique effect, it's you might like this and you might like this, but do you like them together? I don't know. So there are distortions in your manuscript that reflect the group preferences of your group and not necessarily the preferences of your ideal reader. And this is just, it's a natural overflow of the way that critique groups meet. Sometimes,
It would have been like mine taking 3 chapters to explain the quantum physics that it takes for a starship to land on an off planet. Nobody wants to read that.
or perhaps you have a group member who wants to know like what every character is wearing in every scene, like all the time. Unless you're writing a story about a seamstress, or it's or heavily into fashion, then you might not need to in every single scene go into great detail. But that person wants it. Okay, well, this is an example of group think sometimes. Group think happens when all people in a group feel compelled to agree with each other. And as a result, this can lead to a stifling of creative risk. In a group where people don't feel that they can disagree, then they're more likely to just keep their ideas to themselves if it falls outside the norm. And these groups would start writing like each other. They say, this is the only way to do it. You start by this, and then you do this, and then you do this, right? But there's not one way to write. We all have our own ideas for how we want to do it. This can also lead to manuscript repetitions. This is a natural thing that can occur as well, because your critique group will be reading your first chapter in maybe January and your 15th chapter in like June. And by the time they get to June, they have forgotten, who's Hank? Oh, well, I mentioned Hank in chapter 1, remember? No? Okay, well, I'll just tell you a little bit more about Hank here in chapter 15 so you all remember. But your reader is not experiencing your work that way. Your reader should experience your work in hours and days, not weeks and months. So sometimes those repetitions aren't helpful. Because you can't see the big picture very easily, this can lead to ever-evolving storylines and revision after revision, and that's natural. That's natural. There's no problem with ever-evolving storylines and revisions, but it gets tangled in your critique group's mind, as it does in your mind when you have story over story overlapping. In the end, you're going to need to get an outsider's opinion.
Especially if you have a lot of characters.
Yes, yeah, you need somebody from the outside to look at it with a fresh perspective.
That would be keep a notepad with all the characters' names.
Yes, like a Bible. Yeah. Okay, so how do you overcome that? The secret to overcoming the critique group really is know thyself. You got to know who you are as a writer. You got to know your style. You need to know that you are efficient at getting your message across to your reader. However your style is, know it really well. Who you are, your voice, right? And then know thine ideal reader. You need to know how old they are, what gender they are, what motivates them, what do they like. Sometimes it's helpful to think of your book on a shelf with other books that are in the same category as your book, the comp titles. And then you read those comp titles, read in your genre, and you'll get to know your ideal reader a little bit better that way. You can also reach out to them through social media and find what makes them tick, what they like. Keep learning craft, keep going to the workshops, keep reading and talking to other writers, and flexible attendance. Someone you're asking about, what do you do when they just don't listen? Or if you feel like you need to move on to a different critique group, you should be able to. I really think so. Critique groups that meet for years and years, and if they're frustrated, then I feel like they've lost that dynamic, fresh ideas sometimes. Sometimes it's a matter of deciding to be open-minded. And finally, having a mechanism for whole manuscript swaps is really helpful to allow everybody to see the big picture in your manuscript. Okay, do I have time for this? Yeah, okay, I'm gonna go fast. I'm gonna go fast here. Critique forums. This is where you would go if you can't meet in person for whatever reason, you have time constraints, you perhaps are writing in a genre where you just can't find anybody to have a critique group with, you might consider critique forums. And it's a great option because with critique forums, you get to see an author's profile. You get to see their background, read sample chapters. You can even see what kind of a critiquer they are before you even send them a message. It's a great way to make writing partnerships. Really is. Now, I'm only going to talk about two, critiquecircle.com and Scribophile, and I'm going to do this quickly. Critiquecircle.com and Scribophile are, I think, the most popular critique forums. They're certainly competitors, and they're very similar. They both work on a karma system that keeps all members accountable. This means you read a submission on the forum and you provide your feedback, and as a result, you gain points. For every critique you get, that you give, you gain points. And you spend those points when you submit your own writing. So it keeps people accountable. The critiques are also graded. So you can't get away with only giving good feedback. You have to give negative feedback. And if someone doesn't like your critique, they'll give you a bad grade, and then you'll receive less points as a result. There's free and premium versions for both of these. The premium is $11 a month. If you decide you want to use this as your primary means of getting feedback, it's kind of worth it, actually, I think. It does give you access to more features, like you can submit more work with less points, get more feedback faster if you use the premium versions. Full disclosure, there are a lot of newbies, and they're called newbies. Newbies are people that are new to the platforms, but sometimes those newbies are also new to writing. So when you start, you will begin in newbie queues. You'll begin getting feedback and giving feedback to people who are also newbies, and sometimes the feedback you get is a little on the dubious side. So you just, again, have to only take the feedback that resonates with you and your writing goals. You need to know yourself well enough to know what that's going to sound like. It is difficult, unfortunately, to get whole manuscript feedback on either of these platforms. Not impossible, but difficult. In my experience, what I've had to do is make writing partnerships with someone and then kind of sneak out the back door and swap our manuscripts and then sneak back in. Because they don't make it easy for you to share a lot of writing at once, intentionally. Major differences. I prefer, if I had to pick, Critique Circle better. My personal preferences, because I think you can get slightly faster feedback on Critique Circle, but they're so similar. The quality of the feedback is about the same. Scribophile, what it's got going for it are the workshops. It has workshops for things like how to write a query letter or for beta reading groups. Any questions?
You said both of them have fees for their membership or for
Premiums. Yeah, in fact, I think Critique Circle has 3 layers of premium. They have a $11 and I think they have another that's like a gold membership. I haven't used them in a while, but when they had 3 layers of memberships.
How do you know about this service?
I've used them. Yeah, I've used them, and I like Critique Circle a little bit better.
So you suggest to start by getting your foot wet by go to the free service, see how it works?
Oh, for sure. If you want to give it a try, go for the free versions first and see if you like it.
And then if it gives you something you think is useful, then it's pony up some money.
That's a great strategy. Yes. Okay. Pop quiz. This is fun. You're going to have fun. I promise. You're going to need your phone.
Oh, this is a joint effort?
No. Okay, get out your phone, and you're going to want to open a browser window and type in www.kahoot.it into the browser window. Okay, how do I turn up the volume for this?
It should be up. Here.
Ah, okay. I think.
Going up, yeah.
You hear that? Yeah, okay.
It could be too loud.
It might be. I don't want to blast you.
How about the volume on your?
Ooh, that might actually be it. Nope.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, once you have your Kahoot open, you're going to want to put in the game pin. It's going to ask you for a game pin, and you write 3340617. We already have 2 people signed in, Captain Seal and Lizard, Smart Lizard, Genius Squid.
Don't know why it's so quiet.
That's okay. It doesn't work on Chrome? Oh, it works on my Chrome. Oh, yeah. I have it so that it'll, yep, you spin it. Yeah, click spin. Yeah. Yep. Okay. You like Kahoot?
Well, no, I have to do a presentation week, and I was like, I have to find a way.
So Kahoot is a fun classroom tool. I've taught AP biology before, and they love this. This is a good way to do pop quizzes for my students. Anyone still trying to sign in here? Or are we getting close? Not even close, okay. Are we there? Anyone still looking to sign in? Otherwise, I'm getting the game started. Okay, I'm doing it. Let's go. Oh, there was one more. Fabulous Iguana. Okay, 7-question quiz, and the winner receives a pen set. Ooh, where's my pen set? Fabulous pen set. Okay, which suggestions should you incorporate into your writing? $16 answers. Okay. Helpful hamster. Looks like you got it first. This is also timed, so your responses, if you respond faster, you get more points, okay? Yes, more points for faster responses. Ready? Okay. Question 2. What is the purpose of a writing critique group? Providing feedback, yes. Oh, helpful hamster is still on top. My goodness, ready? Question 3. What should members of a writing critique group focus on when giving feedback? Wow, it's fast. A lot faster this time.
Yeah, we're gonna win.
It's a nice pen set. Oh my goodness. Okay. Question 4. How can you get individualized feedback to improve your writing? It was all of them, so any answer would have worked. Oh my goodness. Okay. Which of the following should typically not be shared in a critique group? Yes, extremely personal writing. I recommend you don't do that. It's not a therapy group. You could have it as a therapy group. I mean, it's your critique group. You do what you want. Okay.
Yeah.
Question 6. Which of the following is a good guideline for managing critique group discussions? Yep, take turns sharing feedback before open discussion time. Helpful hamster is on fire. My goodness. Okay. Last question. Make it or break it. What is the best attitude to bring to a critique group? All right. Smooth Dog is 3rd place. Who's Smooth Dog? Captain Seal? You're Captain Seal? And who do we have here? Helpful Hamster. Who's Helpful Hamster? Ashley! Congratulations! Yes! Fun! Okay.
I had no idea.
Fun! You should have been cheating. Yeah. Okay. Final thoughts. I just want to leave you with the final thoughts. Critique groups are a great place to give and to get and to grow. Just keep an open heart and an open mind. Thank you. Thank you.